Morning. This is Georgia Court at Bookstore #1. Actually, I'm in my home office today, not in the bookstore. And I'd like to welcome you all and ask you all, if you're not muted, to please mute yourselves and to please stay muted unless it's your turn to read or later on in the program when Nancy, I think, is going to do a Q&A and she'll probably ask you all to unmute yourselves, of course, for that purpose. But I want to welcome you. I'm just pleased to see so many poets and poetry lovers on one call. This is a great delight to me. And I would like you to know that in the chat, those of you who aren't in the book, you already have a copy of the book or will have. But if you want to purchase the book, there is a link to purchase the book from Bookstore #1. So please take advantage of that. And I'm going to introduce the principals, and you all are going to run your show. I understand you have a really wonderful lineup and a wonderful methodology for doing that. So I kind of get to sit back and relax and enjoy. And I'll see you at the very end once I've made my introduction, and hope you all have a great time. What we are talking about today is a brand new book that actually won't be published for a couple of weeks yet. It's called 101 Jewish Poems for the Third Millennium. And the readers you are going to hear today all have poems in that collection. It was, by the way, in November, the best-selling title at SPD, which is Small Press Distributors. And I find that interesting because it was even before its publication date. So I think this is going to be a very popular book. I'm going to introduce Michael Silverman, and then you all will take it from there. Michael Silverman is co-editor, along with Naomi Carlson, of 101 Jewish Poems for the Third Millennium. He is the former editor of the Blue Lira Review and author of the collections The Floating Door, which is published in 2018, and The Breath Before Birds Fly, which was published in 2013. He also co-edited 2 other anthologies, in addition to the one we're celebrating today. And those are the Bloomsbury Anthology of Contemporary American Jewish Poetry from 2013, which he co-edited with Deborah Ager, and a forthcoming Holocaust anthology co-edited with Howard Debs. His work has appeared in over 90 journals, and those include the Chicago Quarterly Review, the Southern Poetry Anthology, the Los Angeles Review, Story South, the Tupelo Quarterly Review, and about 86 others, I assume. So please welcome Michael Silverman. Please unmute yourself and come join us.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And thank you to each one of you who are here. And of course, my co-editor, Nancy. And on my paper, it says I want to thank Georgia and Andrea, but I really want to do more than thank you. I really want to praise you, because without supporters of the arts like yourselves and people have bookstores and people interested in the arts, we wouldn't have the arts. So, thank you for everything that you do and for hosting this here today. And for those of you who are both readers and listeners, because we need arts now more than ever before, so certainly thank each and every one of you for coming. So let me go ahead and introduce my esteemed co-editor, who I couldn't have done this without her at all here, and that is Naomi Carlson, of course. And she is a recipient of the NEA Literature and Translation and Fellowships, and the author of Infusion of Violence, which, if you haven't gotten that book, it is a great little book. And she was named a new and noteworthy by the New York Times. And so without further ado, let me go ahead and introduce to you Nancy, who will take it from here.
Thank you, Matthew. And I echo all his thanks. One of the things that was on his list was to talk about how the anthology got started. And that happened because Matthew said, oh, why don't we have an anthology of Jewish themed poems? And would you like to help me and co-edit? And I said, I've never co-edited or edited an anthology, but sounds like fun. We put out the call. We had over 800 poems sent to us for consideration. We went through all the poems, all the poets. We made the hard choices, and we ended up with 101 poets plus translators, and the rest is history. So we're delighted that we have this book, and we're delighted with Pat Averbach, who is the one who let us know about Sarasota Books, Bookstore One. And I met Pat through my sister-in-law, who is unfortunately no longer with us as of November 1st. But she introduced the two of us, and our friendship continues, and we're grateful that Pat hooked us up with Georgia, and here is our reading. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first reader, and what will happen is we'll have each reader read up to 4 minutes, and they'll introduce one another, and then at the end we'll have time, hopefully, for any Q&A you might have to ask the readers, to ask about the anthology, to ask Georgia and the bookstore, anything you would like to know. Plus you'll have your chat, and you can put questions there too for us. So I am thrilled to introduce Naomi Stone, who is a poet and an anthropologist, and author of 2 full-length poetry collections, Stranger's Notebook and Kill Class, a finalist for the Julie Suck Award.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here, to be part of this splendid anthology, and during Hanukkah as well. And so I'll start. I'm going to read the poem that is in the anthology, and it is from my first book, Stranger's Notebook. As Nancy and Naomi shared with you, I'm also an anthropologist. This poem was written during fieldwork I did in Tunisia and a small Jewish community there in 2003. It's called Parable. They want to know if I know Tom Cruise. And I want to know how to ask if they are upset that a girl may not speak to a boy until he makes her a woman. The sun is glowing hard on dusty streets and whiter homes. The fox asked the fish, "Why not live on land if you fear the fishermen?" In this example, they are the fish, their holy book, water. Thanks so much. I'm going to now read to you a poem that is more recent, that just came out in The Nation this past year. And it is called For My Wife, who is writing a collection of stories called Homescar. Rocks are notched with sea limpets, and the pockets limpets leave once they've sealed into the rock and know themselves most inside it. Shell swelling, softening the stone. You can sketch their home scar with your thumb, the X the body can't stop returning to. Little mollusk driven by the seas, then sealing again to the same known. My glorious wife and I joke about home, grooves in the rock we land in again and again. I am from the soothing of P.F. Chang's, the shoe stores in the mall, the lit waves of others exchanging money for calm. Before that, my people are from fear. My great-grandfather left, hidden in a wagon of straw. He crossed the ocean early, just before he couldn't. I am from fear. I steer clear of harm if I can, wear an extra sweater, and don't let my ankles buckle. Oh, beloved, I will try to be bold. The body longs backward and forward, backward and forward. Thank you so much. I now have the honor to introduce our next poet, Amy Small-McKinney. Amy Small-McKinney's book of poems, Walking Toward Cranes, won the Kithara Book Prize, Glasslear Press 2016. Her work has appeared in the American Poetry Review, Baltimore Review, and elsewhere.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. And I'm so honored to be here, so honored to be part of this anthology. It's very exciting. This poem started out as a argument with myself. I was talking and my rabbi, just wasn't sure about God. Our relationship was difficult. We probably needed a therapist, but God and I. But the rabbi said, it's okay. You don't have to believe in God. You're still Jewish because you're asking questions. I said, okay, that works. This poem is called Prayer, and it begins with the epigraph from the Yisker service, Gates of Repentance. May my life always bring honor to their memory. Because black bivalves filter out filth from polluted waterways. Because they sieve away gallons of water a day. Because we fed our rivers that fed its mussels enough toxins to murder them all. Because with dams taken down, they might reproduce nonetheless. Because the opening of Alta Sea salt mine where Nazis hid stolen art glances out from a mountain called Loser, and the mine continues nonetheless to produce its brine. Because blackness sucks me inside, closes over, no way out, none I can see. Ask why slashes separate one from another like half-closed doors. Because we are separate, and still there's prayer, dumb hope. So I pray while pumping gas, while noticing a crack in the hubcap, notice a $4 breakfast of coffee and bun. And because I have no choice, listen to the blare from inside someone's car that shuts out my prayer, then opens it again, busting into the world like Brahms' discordant irregularities. And that is prayer's paradox. It annihilates, it lifts, annihilates the other while lifting me up into a false sky, blue, not blue, but a shapeshifter, trickster, broken tongue that tries to coax me, sell us, solid members of a middle class who are now the poor with better credit. Faith in heaven, only one way up. I pray on the toilet to bluebirds and jutting tan branches my dead mother framed. Pray for chipped dishes to dead grandmothers, their dishes white with gold flecks, or while waiting for blood to become water and suds. Last night with fist over heart, I thumped for each sin. I know I sin, though I'm not always sure when or where. For that I am sorry. For the blue jellyfish that are not jellyfish, but colonies of polyps washed up on a cold shore. Though I don't know why, I apologize to them or for breathing and war. Though I'm not always kind to my husband or child. So late at night, alone and remorseful, stuff inside like stolen art, hidden in a mine, crackling chips or creamy cookies. It's funny, it's not. Because food and anger are the bounty I covet, when the hole inside becomes a trench so deep, I feel my ancestors' bones could fall into myself, not return. When I am drowning in a river of not forgiving. I pray nonetheless to the middle of the night, blanket bloodied with my husband's pain. Pray to escape Nebuchadnezzar's furnace alive, intact, amazed. Oh blood, oh chips, oh hubcap, oh gas tank, oh toilet. Remember the mighty muscles and salt mine that surprise even me. Pray, notice, remember homes burned to the ground or flooded without arcs in our country of bitterness. We wait for the other shoe to drop. And that poem is dedicated to my husband, Russ, who died during COVID, June 28th. Now I have the great honor of introducing Carlysachs. Carlysachs is the author of The Steam Sequence and Descendants of Eve. She works for the Jewish Federation of the Bluegrass as the co-director of PJ Library. Let's welcome Carly.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and to just get to hear poetry again in my life. It's just such an honor to be among all of you guys. This poem that's in the anthology was written when I was a fellow at the Drisha Institute at New York City, and I was immersed in biblical Hebrew and Talmud study. The poem is called Talmud Study. How do you measure anything? Count your deaths. Who loves you? Who loves you not? Today, you are the ox. Tomorrow, the victim of the gorging ox. You build a house, you are holy, but your walls are shaky. Inside, there is wine to be drunk. Outside, there is a plague. You are on the wrong page. Someone is coming to town on a donkey. He will insult your intelligence, then ask for forgiveness. Everything is a ratio, parts of the whole. You watch the ants as they crawl across your plate. You snuff out every third one with your pinky finger. Years later, they will say blood, frogs, boils. But what are they remembering? Your house is falling. Who is the protagonist, and what is it that he wants? And I have one more untitled poem that I just wrote, 11/22/20. Soon there will be rain and news of everything else in the world. But now the crows swim through gray November sky, nonchalant and graceful, suspended in air. My daughter points out everything yellow, her slide, the swings, the telescope, and railings of her playset, her joy in knowing and saying. The world stretches as far as our roof, the road, and for a moment, this is all there is, blackbirds, yellow delights. And now it is my honor to introduce our next reader, Sass Orol. Sass Orol is a writer and rabbinical student from Raleigh, North Carolina. They completed an MFA at North Carolina State University, and their first book is forthcoming from Ben Yehuda Press.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to read the poem that's in the anthology first. It's called Minyan. When a man is in mourning, 9 others are needed before he can say out loud that God is good. It is forbidden for a man to hold a blade, even a safety razor, against his own neck. It is expected that he will pray with his hair covered by both kippah and shawl. I get the call in front of the full-length mirror. Hey man, we need a 10th. Trap the phone against my shoulder and fondle the gelled breasts filling out my borrowed bra, nibble my dark lipstick, finger the high slit on my calfskin skirt. One more grieving man. Will I not let him weep? I'll read one more. I like to write a lot of poems that queer our patriarchs. This one's for Avraham, called Little Sister Avraham. Starts with a quote from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. We have a little sister, and she has no breasts, What shall we do for our sister the day she is spoken for? We are taught that Avraham the patriarch was like our little sister, who did not yet have breasts, or maybe never would. All bodies are mistranslated prophecies. Who really has all the parts they planned for? This Avraham sheds the scaly desert evenings, grinding down his blackest flint to a surgeon's edge. This Avraham skirts up with that heavy-handled blade, hostage style on his own upper thigh, shouting down the air's hot voices to save a few lecherous souls. This Avraham serving curried goat to 3 strange turbaned men in his tent, smiling all the way through the itch that never leaves his chest, all day scratching the soft fat under his nipples. Too hard he bleeds an ingrown pore, too gentle and there's no relief. Never any relief. Even as he's face to face with his God, too nervous to say, I'll do all you ask, but first, a deal. I'll follow your invisible back from Egypt to Ur. I'll smash my father's idols, burn the temples of his faith, but first, 2 gifts in return. The perfect breasts, the 2 that always haunted me, faithful and gravid, weighed down and tipped up, veined through with limbic pinks and purples, earthen brown, fearless breasts, and don't call me petty until I've paid your price. I will lead the nation to your promised land with a twice shaved face in my poorest woolen robe, unadorned, but for a deep cut V. It's my honor to introduce our next reader. Leslie B. Neustadt is a retired New York Assistant Attorney General and current board member of the International Women's Writing Guild. She is the author of Bearing Fruit, A Poetic Journey, as well as a visual artist.
Thank you. It's my honor and delight to be reading the first from the anthology, Rosh Hashanah Migration. My Judaism slips away, stutters into silence. Hebrew's honeyed letters no longer sweeten the blackboard. Vowels offer no redemption in the wasteland of Hebrew consonants. My roots overgrown merge into the nothingness where faded memories live. I'm often drawn to circles where I'm the only Jew, yet Judaism unlocks a roadblock to Shena Leah, my beloved self. No Lador Vador in my family. I find myself celebrating the arrival of 5779 with a flock of swifts who alight in Portland en route to Mexico. Their migration part of the great mystery, an inner woven with feathered genes. The swifts circle the stars, then slumber in a chimney at my grandson's elementary school. Visiting from upstate New York, I find Congregation Chavara Shalom. And for a few hours, I return to my flock, breathe in the familiar chants, and weep. The same prayers and lamentations heard in temples around the globe. My childhood devotions return to me. I wrap myself in a talit, cover my head in white, claim my birthright to have an aliyah, to bless the Torah. I open the door to the stranger who is myself. I stay until the last drop of honeyed prayer. I'm going to read another poem to introduce a humorous note. Secret Society of Tongue Eaters. Let us gather to sing praises to the tongues upon which we feast, debate the pros and cons of hot or cold, plain or sauced. We were the kids who ate everything on our plates. We weren't horrified at eating a cow's tongue. We didn't think about it. After all, we ate stuffed derma, chopped liver, lung and stew. My father would boil a tongue, slice it thick, serve it hot on seeded rye with French's mustard. Tongue was on the guest list at my wedding. Grandma Rose flew from Schenectady to Philadelphia with 2 brown-clad suitcases. One contained sweet and sour tongue, the other Nudelkugel. My mother-in-law, Ruth, loved tongue, but at 90 was forbidden to eat it because of the salt. The last time we had lunch, I let her have 4 slices. After a few bites, she asked, "Are you having an orgasm yet?" Thank you. Jewish works include 3 books of poems, 2 collections of short stories, an anthology published by Oxford University Press, and a novel.
Hi, I would like to introduce Mary Jane White before I read my own poem, because I will read my poem in the original, in Russian, and it would be better if Mary Jane White reads her translation first, so you know what the poem is saying when I read it in Russian. So I will introduce Mary Jane White now. Mary Jane White is a retired trial lawyer who holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and has been awarded 2 NEA fellowships, 1 in poetry and 1 in translation. Her Tsvetaeva translations appear along with early original poems in Starry Sky to Starry Sky, Holy Cow Press, 1988, in New Year's, an Elegy for Rilke, and in Poets Translate Poets, published by in Syracuse 2013 by Syracuse Press. After Russia, Poem of the Hill, Poem of the End, and New Year's, Poems of an Emigrant, a bilingual edition, was published this year by Adelaide Books in New York. So Mary Jane White will read her translation of my poem.
I'm very honored to have been asked to translate Nina's poem. She and I both translate Marina Tsvetaeva, and so it's just a great honor to be asked to translate Nina. This is her poem. Like lambs, they were led to slaughter without being told anything. But a god peered out of the ditch into which the corpses rolled. As he peered through the cracks of barracks and crematoria, which were built by people on the orders of other people. Poor God, he was not consulted when they were killing millions. And now they say there is no God since he allowed so many to be killed. And that God was one of those lambs who they led to slaughter. He was one of those black-eyed boys, a mother with an infant at her breast, an old woman limping up to the ditch's edge. Nobody knew about this. Neither those who gave the order to shoot mother and child as one, to economize on bullets, nor those who saw and forgot, so nothing could trouble their sleep. And afterwards, the earth breathed, as if the corpses were moving, and one got up, not quite dead, and began to walk the forest path which no one else had walked, slept in bushes, moss was as soft as a bed, ate berries for dinner, his eyes grown large with hunger, gazed on hares and squirrels, while wolves and other beasts let him be. They knew better than to eat a god. And so he survived 2 years. And when he came out of the forest, villagers surrounded him, pointing at him, pointing. Look, a walking corpse. That god was mangy, like Mowgli, saying, go away from here. Nothing's left for you here anymore. So he went away and lived into his old age in rooms close by the sea in a town called Bat Yam. Better than Yama, the god joked. And when he died, nothing of him remained except an old notebook, and in it 2 words, I survived. That page was torn out, placed in a museum, and that's all I know about that god. And now Nina will read the Russian for you.
Hi, I just want to say that I often write about the Holocaust just because, oh, I'm muted. Oh, because all my grandparents and my great-grandparents were killed in the whole, one grandparent was killed by Stalinists, but all the other grandparents and great-grandparents were killed in the Holocaust and in what is sometimes called Holocaust by bullets. And actually 40 members of my extended family, about 20 on my father's side and about 20 on my mother's side were killed. So that's why I often write about it. Okay, so I'll read it in Russian now. The one that Mary Jane just read in English. Как ягнят их вели на жертву, но не говорили какую, а Бог глядел из канавы, в которой валялись трупы, а еще он глядел из щелей, бараков и крематориев, которые построили люди по приказу других людей. Бедный Бог, тебя не спросили, можно ли умерщвлять миллионы, а теперь говорят, нет Бога, раз позволил им так умереть. А что Бог был одним из ягнят, которых вели на жертву, черноглазым мальчишкой был, мамой с грудным ребенком, старухой, доковылявшей до рва, никто об этом не знал, не те, кто отдавал приказ, мол, в мать и ребенка разом, чтобы сэкономить пули, не те, кто глядел и забыл, чтобы ничто не мешало спать. А после земля дышала, будто двигались трупы, и встал один, не совсем убитый, и пошел по лесной тропинке, по которой никто не ходил. Спал в кустах, мох как постель был мягкий, ягоды ел на обед, глазами большими от голода смотрел на зайцев и белок, а волки и прочие хищники его не трогали, ведь Бога они не едят. И так он прожил 2 года, а как только вышел из леса, окружили его селяне, и пальцем на него, пальцем, вот же ходячий труп, заросший был Бог, как Маугли. И давай, говорят, отсюда, не осталось тут для тебя ничего. И он уехал, и дожил до старости в квартире у самого моря, в городе таком, Бат-Яме. Лучше, чем в яме, пошучивал Бог. И когда он умер, не осталось от него ничего, кроме старой тетради, и в ней 2 слова «Я выжил». Вырвали из нее лист, положили в музей. Вот и все, что я знаю о Боге. Okay, and I would like to thank Mary Jane for reading her wonderful translation of my poem. And now I will introduce Jen Karetnick, the next reader. Jen Karetnick is the winner of the 2018 Split Rock Review chapbook competition for the Crossing Over, as well as the author of 8 other poetry collections, including The Burning Where Breath Used to Be and Treasures That Prevail, published by White Point Press. Finalist for the 2017 Poetry Society of Virginia Book Prize. Her work has appeared widely in publications including Michigan Quarterly Review, the Missouri Review, North American Review, Prairie Schooner, River Styx, Salamander, Tampa Review, and Verse Daily. She's co-editor, co-founder of the daily online literary journal SWWIM, Every Day, Swim Every Day. So Jen Karetnick.
Thank you so much. So grateful to be here and to be in this anthology with so many wonderful poets. And just a quick apology for, I'm going to be leaving right after this reading because I have to teach a workshop at 3. So I apologize to the poets who come after me that I'm not going to be able to hear you. I'm going to start with a poem that's in the book. This is a poem about anti-Semitism, which I wrote right after the previous election. It's called Property of Climate. People of other are known as lichens. Dandruff on the scalp of the earth, we layer between desert sand, slag, and Arctic tundra where nothing else roots, not even a mirage of a river that parts to make way, or the aurora borealis festering in hues too toxic to be natural. No matter what our books say, only hate opens for passage, only fear commands. There is no manna. If it falls, it's from a heaven we no longer believe in anymore. A test tube ecosystem reproducing our same, we live on smog and cement to grow forward a millimeter at a time. We do no harm, but are well aware that too many of us together will be seen as a sign of sickness. We are always ready for the breaking of the bough, the knives that scrape us loose for feeding to the fire, the salutes and jackboots that kick us out to colonize yet another of shell or fractured gravestone kind of place. We are among the first to arise fresh rock. Our genes date the cooling. But those who insist on viewing us as unwanted guests, who showed up at the party too early, carrying our coats and wine for each other, must also know that we will always be the last to leave, outstaying even the most barren, inhospitable host. And I'm also going to read a newer poem. This poem just won the Tiferet Poetry Prize. And it's the first poem I wrote in my new house. So it was kind of valid. It's called Birkat Habayit, A Woman is a Bird When. And this is the blessing for a new home. So I thought it was kind of appropriate. The title is the part of the first line. It's also a villanelle. A woman is a bird when, wood under feet, dressed in flower parts, she surveys her private garden, ragtag, everything in it equal to her heart. Downsize, they tell her, it's only a start. Learn to bolster what's beginning to sag. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts, a woman is a thorn, poisonous dart. Planes fly away from the kite of her back, everything in them equal to her heart. Convertibles accordion, roofs hard. Oh, to feel again the pain of the egg. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts, a woman goes rogue, winging wide apart, her flock caught in a current of jet lag. Everything in it equal to her heart. One eye doll wide, squinting and alert. She talons her home like a prized handbag. Wood under feet, dressed in flower parts, everything in it equal to her heart. And I apologize for my dog playing with his chew toy right in the middle of that, but that's what you get when you have a Zoom reading. So thank you very much. It is now deep honor and pleasure to introduce Marilyn Callett, who served twice as Knoxville Poet Laureate. She has published 18 books, including How Our Bodies Learned, For the Holidays, One for Each Night, Hanukkah Tales, and Recipes.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you, Naomi, Carlson, Nancy Naomi Carlson and Matthew E. Silverman. Hello to the Mishpocha. And I'm going to read first the poem from the anthology, which I wrote at Mount St. Francis in southern Indiana, because that's what a Jewish girl, nice Jewish girl will do. Removed, March 19th, 2012. At the Franciscan friary, all the news is apple blossoms, white opossum, ghosts in the historic barn. I'm too removed, won't be reminded of anti-Semitism, fresh murders in Belle France. A French Algerian gunned down a paratrooper, 3 French soldiers, then a teacher and 3 children in Azar HaTorah, their Jewish elementary school. Toulouse lies an hour from our workshop in Ovilar, farther from this friary in rural Indiana. Bullets don't ricochet overseas. The anti-Semitism that killed keeps killing. I'm removed and hear the news as Eastern bluebirds. I don't hear shooting. Jihadists won't write about Paris gendarmes cheered by the Gestapo. The raffles, roundups, not winning tickets. July 1942. Drancy. 2012, the French come to terms with cardboard memorials and a lone railway car. The plaza hosts a circus and drug deals. Sept fois, Auschwitz, what I do now. This is one I've been working on recently. This is, I'm going to dedicate this to my new grandson, our new grandson, who is Jack Alexander Hanselman, born on December 3rd. It's called The New York Grandma Disputes Marcus Aurelius. Nothing lasts forever or even for very long, Marcus Aurelius opined. Oi, he didn't know Uncle Harry, Grandma said. His stories were snoozers and he passed gas at the table. Marcus, are you nuts? Didn't know Cossacks, how long we hid. No joke. Marcus the bilious never got packed into storage for Ellis Island. But you got here, Grandma. Look at the bright side. Oi, Grandma said, it was dark for a very long time. Aurelius was a Schlemielius. Ask your Uncle Nat how long steel bars lasted in Sing Sing. Ask the East River how long it took to sink his guns. Ask the ones riddled down. Oh, stop it, Grandma, we need hope. Oi, hope. The cockroaches on Coney Island had hope. Ask my guitar stashed on top of the hall closet how long it waited. Sometimes I play when no one hears. In secret, I strum Yiddish songs and my heart rejoins the beat. Secrets grow long. Music echoes over Steppe's past pogroms. And love? I'm still holding my baby daughter, my sons, and the mothballs from my secondhand store are staving off hungry enemies, keeping your little wool coat safe in case by some miracle there's a great grandbaby or a brisk moving day. Do you hear what I did at the end there? Brisk. Okay. Now we introduce David Greenstone, who is a Dallas-based trial lawyer and poet. His poetry has been published in Poetica magazine, Blue Lyra Review, and the Ms. Morlell David anthology.
Hi, everyone, and I want to again thank Matthew and Nancy for putting this all together, and it's just such an honor. I can't even express how much of an honor it is to be included among this incredible group of poets. The first poem that I'm going to read is from the anthology. It's called The Richest Man Who Ever Lived, and it actually, the origin of this poem came from an article that I saw. I can't even remember when I saw it, but it was actually titled The Richest Man Who Ever Lived, and it was about some guy who they were saying was that person, and it immediately got me thinking that I wonder if that's really true. I wonder if that person really is the richest man who ever lived, which was the impetus for this poem. The richest man who ever lived. I wonder if he had 3 daughters with curly blonde hair and attitudes, who grew up too fast right before his eyes, who he tucked into bed each night, one by one, the bedtime ritual growing longer and more complex, and later with each passing year, but always with stories and songs and kisses and prayers, and then another prayer, that what he had been so blessedly given should not be taken away. Please, just please. The richest man who ever lived walks the halls of his kingdom each night, after all is quiet. And he knows how small he truly is, how small it all is, how precarious, how precious, how limited. He knows, and he has always known. And he is terrified. The second poem that I wanted to read to you is one that is actually, it's sort of related to that one a little bit, although I didn't realize it until recently. It's about my great-grandparents who I never knew, but who, like so many others, made what would have been a horrible decision to pack up everything and come from Russia to Ellis Island. And I just got to thinking about this conversation that they must have had at some point as they made this awful decision, and how it led to where my family has gotten today. And the poem is entitled Berta and Georgie. Get up, my love, get up. It's time. But it can't be. It's 2 a.m. The house is quiet. They are all asleep. Get up, my love. It is time. We must go. But that can't be true. It can't be now. The kids have school in the morning, and I must work, and our home, and our shul, and my mother, and our life, and our happiness, and our everything. It's here, all here. How can we just go? You must get up, my love. There is no school tomorrow, and no work, and no shul, and no games to play with the children. There is no life here, not anymore. There are only soldiers. But how can this be? Why to us? Why now? How can we gather them up and take them from their beds in the dark and just run? How do we do that? What kind of person does that to his family, his beautiful little children? Who does that? We must, and we will. And we will now, you and I, we will wake them up and get their coats on and gather what we can carry, and we will go now. We will go together right now, this moment. We are the kind of people who would do this. We are. But how? Why? Because, my dear love, there is another house and another family with beautiful children and a happy home and a safe place, and it is far from here, so very far. And they need us. They are waiting for us. They belong to us and we to them, and they need us right now, or they will never be. Do you understand? We must get up. We must go. We must go right now, or else they can never live. We are the kind of people who must do this. You must get up. There is no time. Only what is next. Thank you guys for listening. And it is my great honor to introduce Alice Fryman. Alice Fryman's 7th poetry collection, Blood Weather, is from LSU Press. She is a recipient of many honors, including 2 Pushcart Prizes and inclusion in Best American Poetry.
What happened? Did I mute myself? What happened?
Are you muted? Okay.
Oh, I'm here. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you so much for being here. I remember when Nancy, Naomi, and I had a wonderful email chat together in the middle of the night, one night. I wonder if she remembers. The poem I'm going to read is in response to a friend of mine who collects Southern memorabilia from the Civil War, and he likes to brag about it. So this is called Ammunition. My childhood home didn't have guns from 3 wars mounted on the walls as yours did. We had other weapons. We learned early how to hone in on the soft parts without all that metal. We had eye darts and below the belt ridicule. We had a stick it to you, you'll never get rid of it, shiv in the ribs. So I'm not impressed by your antique roadshow collection of flintlocks and Smith and Wessons. great-grandpa's blunderbuss. Nor do I envy your born into it flags, rebel yells, and honorable causes. My ammo's smeared with older blood, Rue blood, Jew blood, so much blood the world's sick of hearing about it. One look at that lady in the harbor raising a torch to her own platitudes, and we see through, and we thought we could forget the malice we'd been taught. Why not? A new leaf in the book, a new page, a new start in this America, this streets paved with gold, America of pushcarts and factory piecework. Tell me, friend, you with the guns, what other true blue Americana decked your walls? We had Roosevelt, Franklin Delano, a grinning photo of the man who was going to save us. Trouble was, he couldn't save us. Nothing could save us. Not even the 6 million he let slip through his fingers. 6 million shot, starved, or up the chimney to add to our stockpile for future use. Their DNA roiling down the gutters of Brooklyn, up the broad avenues of Manhattan, and across the Hudson to follow us wherever we went. No, we never had stashes of guns. We had violins and books. And if we had to hide or hightail it and run, we took what we could with us. Sure, we gave America corned beef on rye, lox, bagels, and George Gershwin, not to mention the Salk vaccine, cheese Danish, and Phil Levine. You can't say we weren't generous, but don't be fooled. We had weapons, and we could dish it out with the best of them. Ice Pick Willie had nothing on us. He used a gun. We used guilt. I'd like to introduce Pamela Hill Epps. Her work has appeared in a variety of literary publications. She's a psychologist, poet, and jazz musician living in Tampa, Florida, with her partner and cats.
Hi. It's an honor to be here, to be considered in this wonderful anthology. Every poem is just, it's a gift. So I will start with the poem that's in the anthology. Just really briefly, when I was 5, my father became a Hasidic Jew. Prior to that, was not religious at all, and it led to the breakup of our family. So that's just the backstory. This is called Blessings. Your hand is heavy on my head. I have waited my turn and stepped forward. Your arm extends, palm down, eyes shut, whispering a prayer. This is my favorite part of the visit. Otherwise, I hardly see you. You are either in synagogue or searching your books as if they held life's recipes for good luck. Mostly my arms are folded in front of me all weekend. But much younger, I held your fervor to my heart, still missing you fiercely. Now I have learned the sharp edge of loss and care for just this small thing. The feel of your big knuckled hand on my head, how this weight keeps me from floating away. You have had 5 more children. My older sister, your first, has become a feminist. I am fast on her trail. Ashamed, I still want the blessing. From a man who thanks God every day that he was not born a woman. 40 years and 1 stroke later, you speak no known language. You are asking me a question that I pretend to understand. I tell you, I don't take solace in God, that I have not learned how to pray. My lips press your forehead. I mumble a few words. It could be a blessing. This next poem is about a visit I made to my brother, who also became a Hasidic Jew, and I lost touch with him for many years and went back to visit him in Israel. His son was dying, leukemia. This is called Jerusalem. I am with family who are strangers. 25 years is a canyon of time. We traveled oceans to reach the Dead Sea, feel the west wind blow, wander like beggars, our bowls empty, our pockets filled with scraps. Here in this city on a hill, Kafka and Buber and Gertrude Stein hang on walls in disbelief. The rabbis with their holy beards and black coats mumble prayers no one remembers. As we walk to the wall, stones underfoot are no comfort. Heads lean against its cruel face, hands press prayers into its cracks, folded paper falls to the ground like snowflakes. On the bus, a father soothes his daughter's tears, her eyes the color of Israel's sky in summer. She listens to his ancient words, then sleeps. My children are miles away, like this country. They are cloth torn in two, Jew, not Jew. Their father's name hangs like a curtain I must draw so I can kiss the head of my brother's sick child, recall a discarded God, pray for a cure. Thank you. And it's now my honor to introduce Julie Enszer, who is the author of 4 poetry collections, Avowed, Lilith's Demons, Sisterhood, and Handmade Love, and editor of Milk and Honey, a celebration of Jewish lesbian poetry.
Thank you, Pamela. Thank you, of course, to Nancy and Matthew for this anthology and for including me in this reading, and to all the other wonderful readers and Bookstore One in Sarasota for hosting us this afternoon. My poem in the anthology is called Nida. I imagine being from, but still with my wife, an orthodyke, though the fantasy falls apart since she isn't Jewish. But if she were, I imagine us following family purity laws, Nida in Hebrew, the days of our menses, and 7 days after, 7 clean days, we sleep apart. Imagine some months we might separate 3 weeks, counting days, waiting for our reunion. Here is the question to which I always return. I know God accounted for our love, for the desire of one woman for another, for families arranged around lesbian love, lesbian desire, lesbian commitment. But still, I wonder, did God account for our bleeding bodies when laying the laws of Nida? And then I'll read one other poem from a manuscript I'm working on that imagines the world of the Lamed Vavniks, and particularly the world of angels involved with God and the Lamed Vavniks. And one, Terza, is the speaker in this poem, and she's a Hashmal from Maimonides' configuration of all of the angels. And the poem is called Terza Expounds on Africa. One of the Tzaddiks is always an anti-colonialist organizer in Africa, addressing hunger, healing fistulae, advocating women's education. And this Tzaddik carries so much of the world on her head. The center of gravity tips when she is around. Yet people do not see the world spinning, changing around them. They do not see how this Sadik alters their destiny, though ultimately she always gets extra recognition. Whoever God selects as a Sadik from Africa becomes an international celebrity. It is as if there is a special relationship between God and the cradle of humanity. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Bruce Bond. Bruce is the author of 27 books, including Plurality and the Poetics of Self, Scar, The Calling, Behemoth, and Patmos. Please join me in welcoming Bruce Bond. I see Bruce on the list. There we go. Perfect.
Hello. Sorry about that. I'm going to read the poem from this beautiful anthology with thanks to Nancy and Matthew for putting the book together. This poem is entitled Benthos. The fathoms take what we know of light, the ache of it that dims as it goes cold deeper into the ache of dark. Down here, an eye is its own lantern, sunk among the cuttlefish and squid, the angel flesh that swims among the wreckage. Today I walked into a small museum. On a wall, a hill of spectacles, teeth, a memoir bound in human skin. I have read this book skin to skin, and yet I think a part of me reads it in the dark. If this is the past, it is far too tiny and too enormous. What you make out in the many faces gets lost in the unspeakable focus of one. And each one difficult to name, to recognize now beneath the mask of no mask. Not enough food to live and too much to die. That's what they say. And it goes on that way for a while, until the story of the boy who begs to be shot, the core of us is strange. Bones of faces float to the surface, and deeper still, a voice, neither theirs nor ours, like a heavy net of cautions that binds us to the world. Perhaps a prayer, a memoir's future tense, or the last breath of a man here high above the dark floor, above the drowned as we know them. The gas blue eel, our black and silent stars. And I have a new book that just came out, Behemoth. Actually, I don't think you can order it. You can pre-order it, but it wouldn't arrive until early January. Because the title poem is a little long, I'm just going to read two short sections from it. So this is section 5 from Behemoth. Always another monster in the room. I tell myself that much when I am angry and afraid, and there are always two. There are no facts anymore, says the man who cuts my hair, and the gray snow falls. The Jews control everything these days. Then silence hangs in the air a moment. I want to say it makes a statement. Truth is, it flows untouched into a second silence where there are always two. Fire taught me long ago there was a column of smoke, enough now to fill a library with dark. And as it disappeared, it smelled like hair. Like hair, it withered, stretching out for miles. After a great suffering, sometimes a God, sometimes a godlike emptiness. Night scatters diamonds and says, the hell with it. Take them all. I know a woman who lost her faith and spoke of it in cold tones I learned to love. It made her gaze abstract and gave 5 million missing a face. I want to say God loves the godless, but what do I know? You talk to the dead, and the dark unknowing opens its arms and says, you there, believer, you too, nonetheless. And something burns away between you and a woman, perhaps a godlike fog, but that is least of your concerns. It is my great pleasure now to introduce my friend, Wendy Barker, who has published 7 full-length poetry collections and 6 chapbooks. Her poems have appeared in numerous journals and anthologies, including Best American Poetry 2013. Wendy.
What's happening? Bruce, what's happening here? I'm unmuted, but where's the, there we go.
You're fine.
Okay. Oh, Bruce, thank you so much. And what a joy to be with you all today. And honestly, to have my poem included in this incredible anthology. Oh, golly. Matthew and Nancy, thank you so much. And for all the work you put into this. And for all of you, just a joy to be with you and hear you all today. So here's my one poem from the anthology. It is called Waking Over Call It Sleep. I'm the closest thing to Jewish in the class, even though at best I'm only 1/8, according to my English mother, who insisted the shadowy figure of her granny was a Jew, since nobody knew her origins and everybody talked as if something had been hushed up, shameful. And of course, everything about her hawk-nosed face was unusually dark, especially the ringlets of her unruly hair. Or I suppose you could count the fact that I'm married to a man whose grandparents arrived at Ellis Island from what is now Ukraine, only 3 years after Henry Roth. Yet none of these students has the seichel to know their teacher is a shiksa and our group is as goyish as pork chops. But they've all been children and they love this novel. They know what it's like to be speechless, powerless, afraid. Nobody needs me to explain the terror of what lies beyond the front door and what lies within, and the paralysis that comes from never knowing when to dash outside or stand by the window behind the blinds. One year, while we were reading Ginsberg, I knew I'd have to describe Kaddish, though I'd never even heard it recited. But I gave it a go, saying in passing that only 1% of our city's population is Jewish, which was when Heather quipped, "Of course, they're all in Hollywood making millions from trashy movies." I put down my book and didn't move. You could hear the whir of the elevator down the hall. When I spoke, I said, that was a very offensive comment. And I realized I was shaking after decades of holding forth in linoleum-floored classrooms. It wasn't like the times I've heard someone saying wet, meaning wet back, which are both despicable terms, and I argue those too. But this time, it was as though I'd been slapped full in the face, called Sheeny, kike, and I swear that tears came to my eyes, though I couldn't cry out, "Gewalt, hell, take that back, you ignorant little bitch." The tension lasted beyond the 10-minute break, which I loosened to 20, and not just for the smokers. This time, I've handed out maps that highlight Galicia, Brooklyn, Tismanitz, the Lower East Side, Avenue D, and 9th Street, and a list with explanations of terms: Passover, Ashkenazi, Knish, Shul, and pogrom. We talk about Friday night and the candles. And everyone is right there in the room with Roth and with me and with my husband, who joins us after the break to tell about the author's life with his duck farm and his Goyish wife and his writer's block. And I begin to wonder if any of these students with family from Monterey or Laredo will someday learn, as a friend of mine did last year, that a great, great, great and beyond grandfather came over from Spain to escape the Inquisition. And if it will happen, as my friend Raoul told me it did, that in the lighting of candles with relatives gathered for a first Shabbat, an elderly aunt in the corner will begin to sigh and to weep. And when they press her, ask her what's wrong, she'll tell them she's suddenly remembering an abuela who covered her face with her hands every Friday night to greet the divine, the Shekinah, and who every week sent one grandchild to buy candles. A child, I'm thinking, who wore a silver cross around her neck and had never heard "who did a murder" hurled in her face with the autopilot contempt of the 6 girls who chanted at me in the bathroom once during 2nd grade as they pointed at the color of my striped dress. "Blue, blue, you're a Jew." But I didn't get it. I thought they were saying jewel. And so now it's my delight to introduce Patricia Averbach. Delighted to introduce her. She's the former director of the Chautauqua Writer Center. Her second novel, Resurrecting Rain, a finalist for Chanticleer's Somerset Award for Contemporary Fiction, won 2 Silver Palm Literary Awards from the Florida Writers Association. So, Patricia, here you go.
Okay. Am I unmuted? It's been a great honor to be included in this anthology and to read with such an incredibly talented group of poets. The poem I'm going to read from the anthology is called My Father's Dream, and it is based on an actual dream that he told me about many years ago, and it's a premonition of death. My father's dream. The door is so low, he bends to enter. Inside, a woman sitting at a table, her hair wrapped in a yellow scarf. As she invites him to sit down, he sees her gold teeth flash. She is unwrapping bundles bound in old copies of the Jewish News. The papers crumble in her hands. Small black letters, aleph, beits, fall from the printed pages, crawl across the floor like ants, each bearing a message larger than itself. The woman draws out skeins of wool and lays them on the table. She twists a length around her palm, pulls out loops and lines to weave an intricate cat's cradle. Simple geometries appear, then alphabets and constellations. Do you know where you are? She asks. He shakes his head. Finland, she says, pulling the strings tight. There are no Jews in Finland. What is he doing here? He turns his eyes to the narrow door. Your turn, she says. As he plucks the twisted string, she hums an old nigun. Dee 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 die, dee dee die dum, that hovers wordless in the air. And he remembers that his mother, dee dee die die, dee die die dum, told him to meet her here. I have another poem. It's called Survivors. My mother warned me not to be a smart mouth like those birds, that noisy crowd hungry for attention. They flashed their little tails until the milliners went wild and plucked entire flocks to plume the belle epoque. The last Carolina parakeets, Incas and his Lady Jane, died in the Cincinnati Zoo. They should have seen it coming. They should have known being too gregarious can be precarious. There used to be great herds of elk in Pennsylvania and Ohio. Eastern elk, wapiti, slaughtered for their meat, their pelts, their ornamental teeth, extinct by 1880. They should have tiptoed off in their stone shoes, kept their heads down, their documents in order, hightailed it out of town, changed their names, vamoosed, like Uncle Mort and Tanta Bess, who caught the last train out of Warsaw, August 1939. Or my husband's cousin Zusha, who passed the war hiding on a peasant farm. She bore her cross, attended mass, peeled potatoes, and stayed warm. And now we're come to nearly to the end, and to close the presentation, a short poem from our co-editors, starting with Matthew.
Thank you, Patricia. I really appreciate that. I'm going to cheat and read a poem that is not in the anthology, one, because it's really long, but also because tomorrow is the 8-year anniversary of the unfortunate Sandy Hook elementary shooting that occurred. And it still haunts me. So this poem is about that. And it is called, "This is not a poem you should read." The halls are decorated with holiday artwork, letters to Santa, and examples of subtraction. Some students are jazzed for morning recess as the mild wind starts to give way to warmth. The teacher gets them ready to transition from morning centers by singing, clean up, everybody clean up." A few hear a sharp noise, a distant rumble perhaps. What is that? Did you hear that? Listen, this is not a poem you should read. No amount of practice drills prepares for what happens next. Listen, no scenario or countermeasures can be taken. Safe is not safe. Listen, the second graders never say, "Sounds like fireworks." A thunderous pop, pots and pans, falling folding chairs, the rattle of baking sheets, ear-splitting bells. 154 aching echoes crack around the corner, stomp down the hall, bang on the other side of the wall. No child says semi-automatic rifle. No one should see the way bullets reshape bodies, break through skin easy as a tangerine, push through bone and blood and anything real, like rain through a stolen shadow. Thank you. And our last, but certainly not least, is going to be Nancy, my wonderful co-editor, who will conclude the program today.
Thank you, Matthew. And Matthew does have a 4-page poem in our anthology. So I didn't think, and he probably didn't think that we wanted to, it's a wonderful poem. So hopefully you'll read it in the book. I'm going to read my poem that's in the anthology. It's not too long. And it has to do with my habit of marrying non-Jewish men. But they do all the Jewish things. My Goyish ex-husband. For 18 years, he was one of the chosen to help knead the challah dough, yeast and sugar dissolved in a tepid bath, oil mixed with eggs, flour sifted on top. Flour dusted his hands like pollen, like ash, what we might have buried if given the chance, before our baby, born blue but alive, was whisked away, and we, not knowing to question Jewish law, halakha, our son deemed stillborn, for not having lived out a month. A mishap of DNA was to blame, though what were the odds that our bloods, mine Ashkenazic and his from a Swedish coast, would carry the same mutant gene? We could not keep grief from our home or from sticking to skin. Unlike the dough, whose lumps we tried to best, a pinch of flour, one at a time, so it could rise, become more than itself, to be rolled into ropes of 3 or 6, then braided like hair of the Sabbath queen, and left to rise again on a parchment tray before baked to a perfect gold. And that concludes our presentation. We want to thank the readers. What an honor to hear all these voices that we've read in the anthology, but to hear them read in the poets' voices. And we want to thank our hosts and Georgia Court. And we want to thank you, the audience, for being here and listening. And now I know we've kept you for an hour and a half. And hey, we've got all afternoon, but we're willing to stay a bit extra to hear if you have any questions for us. I don't see anything in the chat, but you can unmute yourselves and speak up should you have a question.
That was great.
Hi, my name is Judith from Chicago, and it was a pleasure to be a part of this wonderful presentation. I was wondering if some of you could discuss some of your role models, some of the poets that you have found inspiring over the years.
And I'll start, and then we can jump in. Some of my role models are here in this reading. So Alice, what a poet, and Bruce. And I think everyone probably has folks who really made a difference for them. Please jump in.
For me, it was Jean Valentine. Her work spoke to me it just opened the doors and windows of my own poetry. And James Wright. So they were the two that were kind of my mother and father poets.
I would say that, I would say that Adrienne Rich's poetry saved my life. And the poems of Lucille Clifton have had an impact over the years. Yusef Komanyaka taught me how to measure syllables. So those three at the top. But Marge Piercy also, if we're thinking about Jewish poets who were an influence, she has a new book out.
This is Julie. I would say also Adrienne Rich, but also Marilyn Hacker and Muriel Rukeyser. I go back to the collected works of Muriel Rukeyser every year.
You're here.
Extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted, this is Judith again. I just wanted to put in a word for Louise Glick, who just won the Pulitzer.
Nobel.
Pardon me?
The Nobel.
The Nobel, yes, I know. The Nobel. So to me, this is sort of a big deal, not only for women, but for women poets. And if you've never taken a look at the Jewish Women's Archive, I suggest you take a really good look at it. It's wonderful and celebrates women in Judaism in all sorts of great ways.
I'd like to just mention Alicia Ostreicher.
Yes.
Who, I studied with her, and she was pivotal. She taught us how to write what we fear the most.
I'd like to mention Mary Barnard, who was a Northwest poet and a wonderful translator of Sappho. She was my mentor as an undergraduate and taught me a great deal about the practice of translation, and a fine poet too, as well.
I'd like to add that even though they're two guys, but if it hadn't been for Edward Hirsch's work and for Philip Levine, I would not be writing and reading poetry today. So those two, I came across them and then decided I want to do something like this too. So.
How come no one's mentioning Shel Silverstein? I was a children's librarian, and he was the hero to many, many children.
Still is.
But I chime in for a moment. I just want to say that Sandra Gilbert was my teacher in graduate school, and without Sandra Gilbert, nothing would have happened. She was, oh my gosh, she's my poetry mother. And also Ruth Stone, and then there are just dozens of people, some of whom you have mentioned. Amy, thank you for nodding about Ruth Stone. Yes, but just, I mean, on and all those people that you mentioned too. More recently, the work of David Kirby and Barbara Hamby has influenced me a lot, with David Kirby's theory of ultra talk poetry. It sort of allowed me to just spill rather than be quite so contained, but there's so many great poets. Thank you, yeah.
You know, if I may, once again, I've been following Joy Harjo, who is our U.S. Poet Laureate. So I was thinking, as all of you are reading this incredible poetry about our background, I can't help but think of Joy and the Norton anthology of a Native American poetry that she just put together.
Yeah.
Joy Harjo, yes, yes, yes.
If you haven't seen her in person, you know, online, I've been to several events of hers. Check in with the Library of Congress or do a search through Eventbrite, and I think you'll be amazed at her side of the story.
Any other questions from our audience or from our readers?
I too should have mentioned Elisa Ostreicher. Oh my goodness, so many wonderful poets. Yeah, thanks, okay.
And she's in our anthology, and hopefully she will be joining us in a reading. Being the professor I am, giving sufficient wait time, silence.
You might want to mention the next reading.
Oh, so let's see.
That's a stranger from the audience.
Next reading is going to be February 22nd at 7 or 7:30 p.m. and it's going to be at the Buffalo JCC, but it will be virtual. And it is Phil Terman is organizing it, and we're working on our list of readers. And following that, there's going to be something in the Bay Area, but we're not sure when or what time. And we've been doing geographical groupings as starters. So we've got maybe 10 California poets, and we're hoping that we can have them appear. And then a DC reading, we have about 15 DC poets, and that's happening March 21st at 2 p.m. And that's going to have folks like Myra Sklarou and Linda Paston and Meryl Leffler and Barbara Goldberg. How was that, Matthew?
Hey.
Well, I, for one, want to thank you. This is Georgia again. I want to thank you so much. This was a wonderful reading, well conceived, beautifully put together, beautifully read, very enjoyable, very moving many times. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is recorded, so there'll be a recording at some point?
Yes, a recording will be available.
And thank you for believing in our anthology even before it's been released.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone.
Wow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be safe and well.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.